The stars looked different through Vrin eyes. Commander Thalrix stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the small blue planet grow larger on the view screen. 300 years of conquest had taught him to recognize easy victories, and this looked like another one. The planet called Earth sat quietly in space, unaware of what was coming. The Vrin had studied it for months. They knew everything about the humans who lived there. Divided governments, primitive nuclear weapons, no unified defense force, no energy shields, no plasma cannons, nothing that could stop the Dominion. Thalrix had conquered 43 worlds himself. Earth would be his 44th, the Dominion's 165th total. He felt neither pride nor excitement. This was simply what the Vrin did. They expanded. They conquered. They ruled. His tactical officer approached with the final reports. The human satellites had detected them 6 days ago, exactly as predicted. The response was also predictable: panic, emergency meetings, desperate calls for unity. Thalrix had seen it all before on other worlds. What he didn't see was the young communications officer named Hannah sitting in a bunker beneath Sol. She watched her screens with tired eyes, listening to military channels from every nation on Earth. Something strange was happening. The Americans were sharing defense codes with the Russians. The Chinese were coordinating with the Europeans. India and Pakistan were pooling resources. Every nation that had spent centuries fighting each other was suddenly working together. Hannah picked up her phone and called her brother Day One, who worked in the president's office. She told him what she was seeing. He was quiet for a moment, then said something she would remember forever. He said humans were really good at one thing: killing each other. Maybe they could be good at killing aliens too. On the other side of the world, Admiral Taeyang stood in the orbital command center and looked at the numbers. The Vrin fleet had 200 ships. Earth had 73, and most were converted cargo vessels with weapons bolted to the sides. The mathematics were simple and terrible, but Taeyang had spent 40 years in the Navy. He had fought in 3 wars and won 2 of them by not fighting fair. He called his staff together and told them something important. He said the Vrin had conquered 164 worlds by being better than everyone else. So Earth needed to be different, not better. They needed to be unexpected. In a mountain facility in Colorado, engineer Kyung Soo checked his systems for the 100th time. The project he had worked on for 5 years was finally ready. They called it the dispersal grid, and it used every power station on Earth to create interference patterns in the atmosphere. The theory said it could disrupt energy weapons. The theory had never been tested against actual alien plasma torpedoes. Kyung-Soo looked at his team and wondered if they would all be dead in a week. Then he went back to work, because there was nothing else to do. The Vrin fleet crossed into Earth's solar system. Thalrix sent the standard message: surrender now or be destroyed. Submit to Dominion rule. Resistance was pointless. They had heard this message on 164 worlds, and 164 worlds had surrendered or burned. Thalrix expected the humans to ask for time to consider. They always asked for time. Instead, Admiral Taeyang sent a reply immediately. 3 words in clear galactic standard language that every species understood: come and try. Thalrix felt something he hadn't felt in many years: surprise. He read the message again to make sure it was real. Then he checked the translation. Then he forwarded it to the War Council with his own assessment. The humans were either very brave or very stupid. The War Council replied that it didn't matter which. Proceed with conquest. On Earth, President Dai One addressed the planet one final time before the battle. He stood in front of cameras with the flags of every nation behind him. He said humans had spent their entire history fighting wars. Wars over land, resources, religions, ideologies. They had nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times. They had killed hundreds of millions of their own kind. He said maybe all of that was practice. Maybe humans had spent 10,000 years learning how to fight so they would be ready for this moment. He said the Vryn thought Earth was Conquest 165. They were wrong. Earth was where the Vryn would learn what happened when they picked a fight with the angriest species in the galaxy. People watched in cities and farms and bunkers around the world. Some cried. Some prayed. Some loaded weapons and waited. In Tokyo, pilot Ji Woo sat in her fighter craft and ran through the pre-flight checks. She was 26 years old and had logged 3,000 hours in combat simulators. She had never fought a real battle because there had been peace for most of her life. Now she would fight aliens in a war that might end her species. She thought about her family in Bizen, her mother who taught music, her father who sold insurance, her little brother who wanted to be a scientist. She thought about how they were probably going to die if she failed. Then she stopped thinking about it and focused on her weapon systems. The Vryn fleet reached Earth's orbital space. Thalrix reviewed his forces one last time. Everything was perfect. Formation was tight. Targeting was locked. Shields were at maximum. He gave the order to fire the first bombardment, 6 plasma torpedoes aimed at 6 capital cities: New York, London, Beijing, Moscow, Mumbai. Snow Palo. 6 million people lived in the blast zones. The torpedoes launched. Time of impact 4 minutes. On the ground, Kyung-soo watched his console and whispered a prayer he had learned as a child. Then he activated the dispersal grid. Every power station on Earth fired in perfect synchronization. The atmosphere lit up with cascading energy fields. The plasma torpedoes entered the interference pattern and detonated harmlessly at the edge of space. 6 massive explosions turned the sky bright, but killed no one. Thalrix stared at his view screen in confusion. His weapons officer was shouting about energy signatures that didn't match any known technology. The readings looked random, chaotic, almost like static. But static shouldn't be able to disperse plasma torpedoes. Admiral Tae Yang allowed himself a small smile. Then he gave his next order. All ships, attack. 73 human vessels accelerated toward the Vryn fleet at speeds that made the alien sensors scream warnings. The attack pattern was insane: no formation, no coordination, just pure aggressive chaos. And somehow, it worked. Ji Woo's fighter screamed through space at 12 gravities of acceleration. Her body was held in a gel cradle that kept her bones from breaking under the pressure. Her brain was connected to the ship's computer through neural links that let her think in milliseconds. She felt like she was dying and had never felt more alive. The Vryn fighters moved in perfect formation ahead of her. They flew like they were in a parade, each ship exactly where it was supposed to be. Ji Woo's instructor had once told her that perfect formations were easy to predict. Chaos was harder. She rolled her fighter sideways and fired at an angle that made no tactical sense. The Vryn pilot moved to dodge, where logic said she would go, and flew directly into her plasma burst instead. His ship disintegrated. Ji Woo laughed. She couldn't help it. All those years of simulation training, all those scenarios where they fought alien invasions that everyone said would never happen, they were real now. And the aliens didn't know how humans fought because humans barely knew themselves. Her squadron scattered across the battlefield like angry wasps. No formation. No predictable patterns. Just 20 pilots flying on instinct and rage. The Vryn tried to target them and couldn't. Human pilots made decisions faster than the alien computers could calculate. On the moon, Lieutenant Hyojin sat at her railgun controls and tracked the Vryn destroyer. The weapon she operated was simple technology, just magnets, accelerating a chunk of metal to a significant fraction of light speed. But simple worked. The Vryn shields were designed to stop energy weapons and plasma. They weren't ready for a 15-ton tungsten rod moving at relativistic velocity. Hyojin fired. The rod crossed the distance in seconds and punched through the destroyer's shields like they weren't there. The ship broke into 3 pieces. She was already targeting the next one before the debris stopped tumbling. Her commanding officer asked how many she had. She said 4 confirmed kills. He said to keep going. She said she wasn't planning to stop. Thalrix watched his fleet take damage and tried to understand what was happening. The humans were losing ships faster than the Vryn were. The mathematics still favored the Dominion. But the humans weren't fighting like they were losing. They were fighting like they had already won and were just making the Vryn pay for showing up. His tactical officer reported. 23 Vryn ships destroyed. 51 human ships destroyed. The numbers said victory was certain. But something felt wrong. A human cruiser rammed directly into a Vryn battleship. Both ships exploded. Thalrix stared in shock. Ramming was suicide. No trained military force used suicide tactics. It was wasteful and irrational. Another human ship rammed another Vryn vessel. Then another. Thalrix sent an urgent message to his fleet. Avoid the human ships at close range. They were using collision tactics. Admiral Taeyang read the intercepted Vryn communications and smiled grimly. The rams weren't planned. Those were damaged. Ships that chose to take an enemy with them instead of just dying. But if the Vryn thought it was doctrine, they would waste energy avoiding close combat. Fear was a weapon. In the Colorado facility, Kyung-Soo monitored the dispersal grid. It was working, but draining power faster than expected. They had maybe 6 more hours before the grid collapsed. He called Admiral Taeyang and gave him the timeline. Taeyang nodded like he expected it. He told Kyung-Soo that 6 hours was enough. Either they would win by then, or they would be dead. Kyung-Soo found that strangely comforting. The space battle raged for 8 hours. Wreckage filled Earth's orbital space. Dead ships from both sides tumbled through the void. The numbers kept getting worse for humanity. 60 ships destroyed. 65. 70. But Thalrix had lost 37 ships. And that shouldn't have been possible. Not against a species that hadn't even left their own solar system. He made a decision that he had never made in 43 conquests. He ordered a retreat. The Vryn fleet pulled back beyond the moon's orbit. Thalrix sent an immediate report to the War Council. He said the humans were more advanced than the initial scans showed. He said they used unconventional tactics. He said they had destroyed 37 ships before the retreat. The War Council was silent for a long moment. Then they asked if he was requesting reinforcements. Thalrix hesitated. Requesting help on Conquest 165 would be embarrassing. But losing would be worse. He said yes. On Earth, people watched the alien fleet withdraw and erupted in celebration. They danced in the streets. They cried with relief. They thought they had won. Admiral Taeyang didn't celebrate. He looked at his remaining ships, 3 still operational, and knew the truth. They hadn't won. They had survived the first round. The Vryn would come back with more ships, and Earth had nothing left to stop them. He called an emergency meeting of his staff. They gathered in the command center and looked at the projections. If the Vryn came back with reinforcements, Earth would fall in days. Kyung-Soo suggested something crazy. He said they should take the fight to the Vryn, attack their supply lines, raid their bases, make them worry about defense instead of offense. The room went quiet. They had 3 ships against potentially hundreds. But Taeyang looked at the young engineer and nodded slowly. He said humans had always been better at guerrilla warfare anyway. He asked for volunteers for a deep space raid. Every single person in the room raised their hand. Captain Dong Hyan took command of the stealth frigate Silent Dawn and picked his crew carefully. They needed people who were smart, ruthless, and willing to die a long way from home. He found 30 volunteers in the first hour. While Earth repaired what it could and prepared for the next assault, Dong Hyeon took his ship beyond Neptune. Intelligence had spotted Vrin's supply depots in the outer system. They were barely guarded because the Vrin had never needed to guard their rear positions before. Dong Hyeon approached the first depot in silent running mode. No engines, no transmissions, just drifting like debris. The Vrin sensors never saw them coming. They didn't destroy the depot. That would be noticed immediately. Instead, they planted viruses in the computers. They contaminated the fuel reserves with compounds that would cause engine failures after a few days. They sabotaged life support systems to fail slowly. Then they disappeared back into the dark. The Vrin reinforcements arrived 3 weeks later. 3 full fleets, 600 ships. Thalrix had been reinforced by 2 other commanders, brought their own forces and their own judgment of his failure. They prepared for a siege. The second battle for Earth lasted 3 months. It wasn't one fight, but hundreds of smaller ones spread across space from Mercury to Neptune. The Vrin had numbers and firepower. Earth had desperation and home advantage. In Seoul, scientist Bio Ra worked in an underground laboratory with researchers from 30 countries. They had captured pieces of Vrin technology from the destroyed ships. Now they were taking it apart to understand how it worked. What they found amazed them. Vrin technology was advanced, but standardized. Every ship used the same shield generator design. Every weapon had the same power core. The Dominion had conquered 164 worlds using the exact same equipment for 300 years. Bo Ra realized something important. The Vrin had stopped innovating because they never needed to. Why improve when you always won? But humans had never stopped innovating because they were always trying to kill each other better. She called Admiral Tae-yang with her findings. She said if they could crack one Vrin shield, they could crack all of them. She just needed time and more samples. Tae-yang said he would get her samples. He sent teams on salvage missions into active battle zones to retrieve Vrin wreckage. Pilots like Ji-woo volunteered to fly cover for the salvage crews. It was dangerous work. Many didn't come back, but the samples reached Bio Ra's lab, and she kept working. The Vrin pushed closer to Earth. They were methodical and patient. They destroyed the orbital defense platforms one by one. They bombarded the moon bases until they went silent. They established control of near-Earth space. On the ground, Commander Suo organized civilian defense. Every city became a fortress. Every town prepared for invasion. People who had been teachers and shopkeepers and artists were learning to fight. They dug tunnels. They stockpiled weapons. They trained in parks and school gyms. Suo watched them and felt pride mixed with sadness. These people shouldn't have to fight. They should be living normal lives. But normal was gone. Now there was only survival. The Vrin sent raiding parties to test Earth's ground defenses. They landed troops near small cities to see how humans would respond. Sergeant Minho's unit engaged them outside Jakarta. The fight was short and brutal. The Vrin had better armor and weapons, but Minho's soldiers fought like demons. They used the terrain. They set traps. They hit from unexpected angles. The Vrin withdrew after losing 30 soldiers to kill 5 humans. Thalrix read the battle reports and felt growing concern. The War Council said the numbers favored Vrin victory. They had lost 100 ships total, but destroyed all of Earth's major orbital assets. They controlled space around the planet. Ground invasion was next, but Thalrix remembered the suicide rams. He remembered the chaotic fighter attacks. He remembered retreating for the first time in his career. These humans didn't fight like other species. They fought like every battle was personal. He requested permission to offer surrender terms. Let the humans submit to Dominion rule and avoid further bloodshed. The War Council agreed. They transmitted the offer. President Day One received it in his bunker beneath the mountains. He read it carefully. The terms were surprisingly generous. Earth could keep limited self-governance. No mass executions. Cultural preservation. All they had to do was submit. Day One called a meeting of Earth's government representatives. They gathered from around the world via secure channels. He presented the offer and asked for opinions. Some argued for accepting. They had lost millions already. Continuing meant more death. Maybe survival was enough. Others argued for fighting. They said submission meant the end of human independence. The Vring would control their world forever. Day One listened to both sides. Then he spoke. He said his sister Hana was dead. She died when the Vring destroyed the Tokyo orbital platform. He said millions more were dead. He said accepting surrender wouldn't bring them back, but it would make their deaths meaningless. He said humans had one advantage the Vring didn't understand. Humans knew how to lose and keep fighting anyway. They had lost countless battles throughout history and won the wars anyway. He sent the reply himself. Just 2 words: never surrender. The Vring War Council received the message and made their decision. If the humans wanted extinction, the Dominion would provide it. They authorized full planetary invasion. No more measured responses. No more testing. Overwhelming force. Thalrix prepared his armies. He had 100,000 soldiers trained in planetary conquest. They would land at 12 sites simultaneously and crush all resistance. Earth would become World 165 within a month. On Earth, Admiral Taeyang received intelligence about the invasion plans. The Vring had transmitted them in clear channels because they didn't expect humans to stop them anyway. He looked at the landing zones and the troop numbers. Then he smiled. He called his remaining commanders together. He showed them the Vring plans. He said the Vring were about to make a terrible mistake. They were going to fight humans on Earth. Captain Donghayan asked what the plan was. Taeyang said it was simple. Let them land. Let them think they're winning. Then kill them all. In her lab, Bavora made a breakthrough. She cracked the Vring shield technology. It used a rotating frequency that cycled through 12 patterns. Once you knew the patterns, you could time your shots to hit when the shields were weakest. She sent the data to every remaining military unit on Earth. Medical Officer J1 worked in a field hospital in Tokyo, treating wounded soldiers. He hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night in 2 months. His hands shook from exhaustion. But he kept working because people kept coming. A young pilot was brought in with severe injuries. J1 recognized her Ji Wu. She had crashed during a reconnaissance mission. Her ship was destroyed, but she survived. She grabbed his arm and asked if they were winning. J1 didn't know how to answer. By any measure, they were losing. But they were still fighting. Maybe that was the same thing. He told her they would win. She smiled and passed out. He went back to work. The Vring invasion fleet entered Earth's atmosphere at dawn. 12 massive ships descended toward 12 landing zones on 4 continents. Each ship carried 8,000 soldiers and enough firepower to level a city. They landed without resistance. No missiles. No artillery. Nothing. Thalrix watched from orbit and felt suspicious. Where were the defenders? His ground commanders reported the same thing. Empty cities. Abandoned streets. No enemy in sight. They established their beachheads and began marching toward strategic targets. Admiral Taeyang watched from his command center. He waited until all 12 Vring forces were fully deployed and committed. Then he gave one word: now. The cities exploded into violence. Not with bombs, but with humans. They came from everywhere at once: buildings, sewers, tunnels, hidden bunkers. Thousands of fighters who had been waiting in silence for the Vryn to walk into the trap. Sergeant Minho led his team out of the Jakarta subway system directly beneath the Vryn column. They emerged shooting from point-blank range. The aliens had expected organized military resistance. Instead, they got urban guerrillas who knew every street and treated every building as a weapon. Minho's team killed 30 Vryn in the first minute, then vanished back underground before the enemy could respond. By the time the Vryn secured the area, Minho was 3 blocks away, setting up his next ambush in Moscow. Urban warfare specialist Yunji had turned the old metro tunnels into a maze of death. The Vryn had superior sensors and thermal imaging. None of it worked underground in the electromagnetic chaos of Earth's subway systems. When they entered, they found themselves fighting in the dark against an enemy that had grown up in these tunnels. EUNG's unit used knives as much as guns. The Vryn discovered that their advanced armor was vulnerable to blades between the plates. They also discovered that humans were terrifyingly good at close-quarters combat. Thousands of years of killing each other had taught humanity exactly where to cut. Private Ying Wu was 19 years old and had joined the military 8 months ago. He never thought he would be stabbing aliens in a subway tunnel beneath Moscow. But he was good at it. He killed 5 Vryn soldiers in 12 minutes before his unit pulled back. His commanding officer told him good work. Yeon Wu threw up and went back to fighting. Above the battlefield, the Vryn commanders tried to coordinate their forces. Their communications were failing. Systems were crashing. Commanders Thalrix received reports of technical failures across all ground units. In her lab, Bajura watched her virus spread through the Vryn network. They had planted it 3 months ago in captured systems. Then they let the Vryn salvage their own destroyed ships. The virus copied itself to every piece of Vryn technology it touched, spreading slowly and silently. Now it activated. Shields failed. Weapons jammed. Targeting systems gave false readings. The Vryn's technological advantage disappeared, but Biore knew it wouldn't last. The Vryn would purge the virus eventually. They had maybe 6 hours before the enemy adapted. She sent a message to Admiral Tae Young. He replied that 6 hours was all he needed. In orbit, Captain Sung Min had been waiting near the asteroid belt for 40 days. His battleship Retribution had been powered down to minimal life support. The crew survived on emergency rations and recycled water. They sat in the dark and waited for their moment. That moment came when the Vryn ground forces were fully committed. Sung Min activated his ship and sent the signal. All across the solar system, Earth's hidden fleet powered up. Ships that the Vryn thought were destroyed, vessels hiding in debris fields, fighters concealed on asteroids. 73 ships had survived the initial battle. 51 had been destroyed. That left 22. Except the humans had been building more ships in secret facilities on Mars and the Moon, and they had been repairing damaged ships thought beyond saving. And they had been stripping weapons from destroyed vessels to arm anything that could fly. The hidden fleet numbered 98 ships. They hit the Vryn from behind. Sung Min's battleship led the charge, firing the shield disruption weapons that Bu Ora had designed. The Vryn orbital forces found themselves caught between the ground defenses and a fleet that shouldn't exist. Pilot Ji Woo flew again despite her injuries. She had argued with the medical officer Jae-won for 2 hours before he cleared her for duty. Her body was still healing, but her hands were steady. She joined the assault against the Vryn carrier groups. Her targeting computer lit up with hundreds of enemy contacts. She picked the biggest ship she could find and accelerated. The carrier tried to target her with point defense systems. The systems failed. Biora's virus was still working. Ji Woo fired every missile she had and watched the carrier's shields collapse. The ship didn't explode. Instead, it drifted, crippled and helpless. Ji Woo flew past and looked for her next target. On the ground in Jakarta, Sergeant Min Ho received the signal that the orbital battle was turning. He told his team the good news. Then he led them on another attack run. The Vrin were regrouping for a defensive position. Min Ho didn't let them. His team hit them with mortar, then rifles, then grenades. The Vrin tried to fall back, but found themselves surrounded. Civilians who had been hiding now joined the fight. Old men and women who remembered other wars. Teenagers with homemade weapons. They came from everywhere. The Vrin broke. For the first time in 164 conquests, Vrin soldiers abandoned their positions and ran. Commander Sua watched the battle reports flowing in from around the world. All 12 landing zones were collapsing. The Vrin had landed 100,000 soldiers. They had lost 20,000 in the first day. The numbers were devastating. She opened a communication channel to every resistance cell on Earth. She told them the enemy was breaking. She told them to push harder. And it now. In orbit, Thalrix watched his invasion collapse in real time. Ground forces were surrounded. Orbital support was under attack. The virus in his systems was causing cascade failures throughout the fleet. He had never seen anything like it. He sent an emergency transmission to the Vrin Dominion. He said Earth could not be held. He said the humans were using tactics that defied all military doctrine. He said they fought with a ferocity that his flagship's shields failed. A human kinetic weapon punched through the bridge. Thalrix died instantly. The Vrin War Council received his partial transmission. They stared at it in silence. 164 conquests. 300 years of victory. And now this. They sent orders to the remaining Vrin forces at Earth. Withdraw immediately. Retreat to Dominion space. Quarantine all systems that contacted Earth. The planet was to be marked as dangerous and avoided, but the message came too late. The Vrin fleet was already shattered. Admiral Taeyang's forces were destroying ships faster than they could escape. The ground armies had no way off the planet. 40,000 Vrin soldiers surrendered in Jakarta, 30,000 in Moscow. The others died fighting or trying to flee. It took 3 more days to secure all the landing zones. When it was over, Earth counted its dead. 8 million soldiers, 12 million civilians, entire cities damaged or destroyed. The cost was staggering, but they had won. President Daewon stood in the ruins of Tokyo and looked at the sunset. The city was half destroyed, but it was still standing. The people were burying their dead, but they were still alive. Earth had survived. He thought about his sister Hana, who died in the early battles. She would never see this victory. Neither would millions of others. They paid the price so humanity could continue, but Daewon knew something important. The war wasn't over. Earth was safe, but the Vrin Dominion still existed, and they controlled 164 other worlds. Admiral Taeyang came to him with captured Vrin star charts. They showed everything: the location of Dominion core worlds, conquered planets, supply routes. It was a complete map of the enemy empire. Taeyang asked what came next. Did Earth rebuild and hope the Vrin left them alone? Or did they take the fight to the enemy? Daewon called a meeting of Earth's leaders. They gathered in what was left of the United Nations building. Representatives from every nation came, many traveling through dangerous territory to be there. They had one question to answer: what kind of species did humanity want to be? Some argued for isolation, build defenses, guard the solar system, let the rest of the galaxy deal with its own problems. Earth had suffered enough. Engineer Kyung-soo spoke against that idea. He said they had captured Vrin databases. He had been reading them. The 164 conquered worlds were still under occupation. Some populations were enslaved. Others had been exterminated. The Vryn ruled through fear, an overwhelming force. Scientist Bo-Ra stood and added more details. She said the Vryn had been conquering for 300 years and nobody stopped them. Every species that resisted was destroyed. Every world that fought back was crushed. The Dominion seemed unstoppable. Until they came to Earth. Captain Donghayan asked the question everyone was thinking. If Earth could stop the Vryn, why couldn't they free the other worlds? They had the technology now. They had captured ships and weapons. They understood how the enemy fought. Pilot Ji Wu said something that made everyone go quiet. She said humanity had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war. They had killed each other in countless conflicts. They had developed weapons that could destroy their own planet. They had nearly gone extinct multiple times. Maybe all of that was preparing them for this. Maybe the galaxy needed a species crazy enough to fight when fighting seemed impossible. Medical Officer J1 disagreed. He said he had seen enough death. He had treated thousands of wounded. He had watched good people die for a cause they didn't choose. He said war was terrible, and anyone who glorified it didn't understand it. But then he said something else. He said he treated Vryn prisoners too. Young soldiers who were just following orders. They didn't seem evil, just convinced they were superior. The Dominion had taught them that conquest was natural and resistance was pointless. Maybe someone needed to teach them differently. Commander Suao stood and called for a vote. Should Earth rebuild and defend, or should Earth build a fleet and liberate the conquered worlds? The room erupted in debate. President A1 let them argue. Democracy was messy, but important. Finally, after 6 hours, they voted. The decision was not unanimous, but it was clear. Earth would fight. The announcement went out to the planet. Earth was building an interstellar fleet. They would take the war to the Vryn Dominion. They would free the 164 conquered worlds. The response shocked the government. Millions volunteered within the first week. People wanted to join the fleet, work in the shipyards, design new weapons. The factories that had built consumer goods retooled to build warships. Scientist Bo-Ra led a team that combined human and Vryn technology. They took the Vryn faster-than-light drives and improved them. Earth ships could now cross distances that took the Dominion months to traverse. Engineer Kyung-Soo designed new weapons based on one simple principle: unpredictability. Missiles that changed trajectory randomly. Energy weapons that shifted frequencies. Shield disruptors that adapted in real time. The goal was to make every battle different so the Vryn could never prepare. Within a year, the fleet was ready. 137 ships, built from scratch or captured from the Vryn. Each carried a crew that had volunteered knowing they might never come. Home. Captain Sung Min took command of the vanguard. His ship, Retribution, would lead the first assault. Lieutenant Hyo Jin joined as tactical officer. Sergeant Min Ho and his team would handle ground operations. Urban warfare specialist Yoon Ji trained soldiers in the tactics that worked in Earth cities. Pilot Ji Woo trained new pilots in aggressive combat flying. She taught them that perfect formations were predictable and chaos was a weapon. Her students learned to fight like every battle was personal. Medical Officer J1 joined as Chief Medical Officer. He said someone needed to patch up the idiots who thought ramming alien ships was a valid tactic. But he went because he believed in the mission. President Day 1 stood before the fleet at its launch ceremony. He said humanity didn't ask for this war. The Vryn came to Earth expecting easy conquest. They found a species that had been preparing for war its entire existence. He said the Dominion conquered 164 worlds by being superior. Earth would free those worlds by being unpredictable, stubborn, and absolutely unwilling to quit. The Vryn brought order and precision. Humanity would bring chaos and determination. He said one more thing. He said humans spent their history divided by nations, religions, and ideologies. They nearly destroyed themselves fighting over differences. But when something came from outside to threaten them all, they unified instantly. That was humanity's true strength, the ability to recognize what mattered when it counted. A fleet prepared to launch. Admiral Taeyang sent one final transmission to the Vryn Dominion's core worlds. It was simple and direct. He said the Vryn came to Earth looking for Conquest 165. They brought 300 years of victory. They brought overwhelming force. They thought humans would surrender like the others. They were wrong. He said Earth was coming now. Not for revenge, though the Vryn earned it. Not for conquest, because humanity didn't want an empire. They were coming to free the 164 worlds that the Dominion enslaved. He said the Vryn taught humanity one important lesson. They were not alone in the universe. Now humanity would teach the Vryn a lesson. Never threaten someone's home. Never assume victory before the battle. And never, ever underestimate a species that spent 10,000 years learning how to fight. The message ended with 3 words that would become famous across the galaxy. We are coming. The fleet launched into the void. 137 ships carrying humanity's greatest achievement, not advanced technology or superior weapons, but the absolute refusal to accept defeat. They carried the memory of 20 million dead. They carried the hope of 164 enslaved worlds. The Vryn Dominion had conquered for 300 years. They built an empire on the belief that they were superior to all other species. They won every battle. They never lost a war until they came to Earth. Now the humans were coming for them, and the galaxy would never be the same.